You're listening to the Sufficiently Advanced Podcast.
Number two.
I'm Halsey.
I'm Hanson.
And we're bringing you an interesting story about intrigue and danger and radioactivity and isotopes and ions and
crazy science and magic.
Yeah. So today we want to start off by giving out just a couple of shout outs. First one going to a really awesome student who listened to the podcast last week, has been really awesome about supporting us, and went and did the bonus point project that we talked about. And it was actually really cool.
Yes.
He gave us a little heads up on what it was going to be about, and it was an amazing story. I'm looking forward to reading.
I cannot wait to read it. I've been thinking about the concept all day.
Nice.
So there's a little hint.
Was that really a hint?
I mean, at least get them a little interested in it.
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
maybe a little inspiration for someone to maybe one up it or something like that.
Yeah, it was a pretty good story. It reminded me of some good old Twilight Zone kind of stuff.
Yes, agreed.
So Twilight Zone is so good.
There is nothing wrong with your television.
So I thought today we'd actually talk about the periodic table of elements.
I wonder where that idea came from.
I don't know. Probably because we've been talking about it for 3 days.
I don't remember that at all. Weird.
Yeah. I wasn't here that day. But I don't think that you could really start any discussion about the periodic table. I mean, yeah, it's amazing. There's so much information you can get from the periodic table. You know, metals, nonmetals, metalloids, energy levels, atomic structure. You can learn all that stuff just by looking at this thing.
It's insane.
It really is insane how much information you can get from it. But the history of it is almost as fascinating.
I know. I always tell my classes that it's easy to forget that this stuff just didn't appear in textbooks. You know, there was every single thing that we understand right now was a mystery at one point. And somebody solved that mystery, and now it's just common knowledge.
Yeah.
It's easy to take that for granted.
Yeah, I mean, this wouldn't be something you learn in the 8th grade classroom. It'd be something you're learning in universities at the time. So it was very different. But you may think that the history of the periodic table started with scientists. Right? You would assume that.
You would think so. It's science.
And we know so much about it. It looks so cool that you would assume that it started, probably 1890s into the 20th century. Something when we had some technology.
Right.
But no, you're wrong.
Very wrong.
Very wrong. In fact, it started with a pseudoscience called alchemy.
Alchemy. Amazing stuff. So basically, if you're not familiar with alchemy,
watch Full Metal Alchemist.
Also, you are not reading Harry Potter either. So what's wrong with you?
What do you mean Harry Potter?
I think you might be familiar with the first book called something like Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
So if you remember in the book, or if you haven't read it, the Philosopher's Stone was something that was supposed to make an elixir of life, so make you immortal, and turn normal metal into gold, both of which I think would be very useful.
Yes, I definitely need both.
And that idea J.K. Rowling got from alchemy, because this was many, 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 many hundreds of years ago, and even thousands of years ago, people wanted to make magic, wanted to do things like live forever, and obviously we all like gold.
Oh, who doesn't?
It'd be nice to be able to just make it instead of having to find it and buy it, right? So that was the goal of alchemy, is to find a way to become immortal and to make gold.
Now, what was the name of the alchemist in that book?
Nicholas Flamel.
Nicholas
Right?
Flamel.
He was the guy who made the Philosopher's Stone in the book. Interestingly enough, he was a real dude. He actually existed.
You're kidding me, right?
I kid you not. And the funny thing is, as far as we know historically, he had almost nothing to do with science or even alchemy at all. But for some reason, a bunch of texts that came out after he died started saying that he was, in fact, not only an alchemist, but he had actually figured out how to make a alchemical philosopher's stone, and that he didn't actually die and that he was immortal.
Cool.
So that's kind of where the semi-modern alchemy kind of started. It was through him. He's considered a legendary alchemist, not one of the actual ones.
Yeah. Now, when it comes to the periodic, when relating alchemy to the periodic table of elements, you have to really take a look at the early to mid 1600s.
Right.
So during this time, you got to see the birth of modern chemistry, but we need to go a little bit further back. So I want to talk about Henning Brand.
Henning Brand.
Henning Brand.
Weird name.
Weird name. But he was a amateur alchemist. Now, most alchemists at this time had other jobs. It was more like a hobby than anything else.
Makes sense.
Well, so this guy, Brand, in 1689, was trying to create a Philosopher's Stone. He wanted gold. He wanted to live forever. Who doesn't? So this could basically turn anything into gold. Now, to do this, he decided he was going to pee in a cup or a jar and then heat it up until it boiled down to residue.
I mean, that totally makes logical sense. If I were trying to be immortal, I would definitely boil my pee.
Yeah, I mean, that's like step number one. But he was trying to boil his pee. I know, it sounds so weird. He's trying to boil his pee, and some liquid dropped out of his apparatus. Okay. And as soon as it hit the ground, it burst into flames.
That is absurd.
Yeah.
That is nuts.
Yeah, it burst into flames, but it wasn't because he had eaten too many Takis or something like that. It was actually because he had boiled his urine down so much that it was left with phosphorus. Which, if you don't know, phosphorus is what's on the tip of matches.
Yep.
And it's what makes them ignite when you put friction against them. And so it burst into flames. So he was actually the first one to discover phosphorus.
Okay, that makes sense. The purification was a huge idea in alchemy.
Yes.
Because the idea was that if you could find the most pure substances, that would allow you to recreate them into what you wanted to make. Right? So that makes sense. And also, if you want to live forever, they talked a lot about the soul. So if you purified your soul, you would then become immortal. So it's all connected to this idea of purification and experimentation.
Exactly, experimentation. And really, this is where scientific method came from.
Yep.
These were your first true scientists. They did, if you read about alchemy, it seems like it's some kind of like pseudoscience, and they were just kind of crazy people boiling their pee. But they really weren't. They were following very strict guidelines. And the Philosopher's Stone wasn't the only thing that they were trying to make. It wasn't just a Philosopher's Stone. There was also a precursor to that called the Philosopher's Tree.
Philosopher's Tree. Okay, I'm intrigued.
Okay, so we know that no one ever successfully made a Philosopher's Stone.
That we know of.
Yeah. I mean, I came pretty close one time. But although they were able to make what's called a Philosopher's Tree.
Okay.
And so this was actually redone. This experiment was redone by Lawrence Principe, and he worked at Johns Hopkins University. He was a chemist over there.
So very modern.
Very modern. Basically, he got a hold of a bunch of 17th century laboratory manuals that the alchemists had written. Now, this was kind of difficult because alchemists were very, very, very secretive.
Yeah, you didn't want people to know your magic secrets.
No, never. And so they actually had to decipher it. Like they would do things where their recipes were stuff like a cold dragon creeps in and out of the caves. And it was actually a code for saltpeter, potassium nitrate, which is a crystalline substance found on cave walls. And if you put it against your tongue, it has like a cooling feel to it.
I mean, obviously, because if you found some weird residue on a cave wall, why would you not lick it?
Yeah, but I mean, think about cold dragon, like a dragon's breath.
Totally makes sense.
And so this was something that they had to decipher. And so what happened was they decided to reconstruct this method of basically growing gold.
Okay.
And so the Philosopher Tree was basically getting gold out of more gold. And so what he did is he prepared mercury and gold, and he crushed them up into a buttery lump at the bottom of a flask. Then he buried and sealed the flask in a heated sand bath in the laboratory, and he left it alone.
Okay. So he didn't just bury it in a field. This was like a specific thing in his lab.
Yeah, it was a specific thing in his lab.
Okay.
And so one morning after he came back, he noticed that he was completely flabbergasted by this.
Okay.
That the flask was filled with a glittering, and as he described it, a fully formed tree.
Huh. Okay.
So it actually looked like a tree. So the mixture of metals had grown upward into a structure resembling coral or the branching canopy of a tree minus the leaves.
That's
Hence the Philosopher's Tree. Now it wasn't really creating new gold. It was a reaction.
Right.
But I mean that's still the basis of the periodic table.
Okay. How does that relate to the periodic table?
Because it has specific elements. They're already discovering that specific things can't be broken down, but they're trying to mold them together.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That's amazing.
Now, why do we even talk about alchemists? Because when it comes to the history of the periodic table, alchemists really were taken advantage of.
Sure.
So, like for example, the father of modern chemistry, Robert Boyle.
Yep.
Okay, he's the father of modern chemistry.
Okay.
Some sources say that he basically plundered and pilfered alchemist notebooks.
Okay.
Like he stole, he stole their ideas. The father of modern chemistry stole the ideas.
Okay.
And so, even though these alchemists were really big were big influences on the development of the periodic table.
Sure, because if you're messing with all these substances, you've got to find ways to actually do that, right?
Yeah.
So you want to boil stuff and light stuff on fire, and so basically they're the ones who figured out all of the ways to do laboratory tests.
Yeah.
That's where all of lab techniques came from originally. How we figured out how to use things like beakers and stuff. They had to find containers that were able to burn these different things at high levels, and how to mix stuff well without blowing yourself up.
And how to not get mercury poisoning.
Also that. They weren't very good at that, but...
Yeah. There were lots of other famous alchemists.
Right.
My favorite is, of course, Isaac Newton.
Yep. Who is not someone you would think would be into magic and alchemy, but it was pretty much his primary interest. He considered all of his amazing physics discoveries almost unimportant compared to his study of alchemy. So it's not always what you think it is with these older scientists.
Apparently he was a huge jerk.
Oh, super jerk. Okay, so... All right, so jerks aside, we have all this crazy history of people, peeing in buckets and lighting it on fire, and...
You've never done that?
Let's not talk about that. Okay. And then we have our modern periodic table. So we know that, there was some influence there, and a lot of those ideas and our foundation came from that, but how do we go from, okay, we figured out that we can break down stuff, which is cool, and we can't break some of it down further, so we're going to call those elements. Then now we have a periodic table, so we have all those organized now. What is that?
So essentially, there were lots of people that tried to create a periodic table of elements.
Sure.
By 1863, we knew that there were at least 56 elements, and we could already divide them into 11 groups.
Holy cow.
So,
okay.
Based on their characteristics. Now, the father of the periodic table that we use today is Dmitri Mendeleev, beer bro forever.
Beers for life.
Beers for life. Sorry. I love my beard. But have you ever heard about his story?
No.
Okay, so this dude is just like marred by tragedy, and it's actually kind of crazy. So he was one of 17 children.
Jeez.
One of 17 children. So and his dad actually worked at the University of St. Petersburg, and they moved out to Siberia after his dad went blind. Yikes. So basically, they're in destitute, can't like feed the kids. Like of those 17, like only 14 of them at least grew up long enough to like
be an adult.
Be not even an adult, like a kid.
Wow.
Like some of them died after during childhood, even after that.
Good God.
So, but anyway, so Dmitri's mother really saw a lot of potential in him.
Nice.
After his father died, she said, I've got to get him some education. I've got to help him out. And so what she did is she put him on the back of a horse and proceeded to go from Siberia to Moscow.
Okay.
On horseback.
Not an easy journey.
We were talking thousands and thousands of miles. And it was the worst road trip imaginable. Like, seriously. And so they got to Moscow and they said, please take my son and teach him to be, higher educated and a scientist. And they said no.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. And so, not to be deterred, his mother put him back on horseback and decided, well, if they won't take him, I'll take him to his father's alma mater in St. Petersburg.
Should have done that first.
That would have made sense a little bit more. So they went to St. Petersburg and they accepted him.
Nice.
They said, we know your father. We feel bad he went blind and all that kind of stuff. So come on.
I assume it was all happily ever after that?
Oh, no. His mother immediately died.
Oh.
Well, not immediately, but like she didn't survive much longer.
Checks out.
She died from the exhaustion from the trip.
Wow.
But anyway, Mendeleev went on to really discover the periodic table. Now, like I said, a lot of people were trying to make one, but his was the best. To give you an idea, like you would think that it would come after years and years and years of study.
Yeah.
It came to him in a dream.
Ah, nice.
It actually came to him in a dream. The way he described it, he'd been up late working on it for months and months and months and months. And the way he described it, he went to bed like kind of delirious.
Yeah.
And in his dream, he just saw the elements falling into place. And it was like magic, almost like, alchemy, like we were talking about earlier.
Lends itself to the tradition, I suppose.
Yeah. And when he woke up, he immediately wrote it down. And the crazy thing was, so his table, the modern table we have today is based off of atomic number.
Right.
But his was based off atomic mass. He ordered it by atomic mass, which isn't far off from what it is today. But the way he arranged it, not only did he know what those elements of the time, where they would go, but also he was able to correctly identify where elements were missing on the periodic table.
See, that's the crazy part to me. The fact that not only could he create a table with elements that you couldn't actually see the atoms, so that alone is amazing. He figured all this information out about them without being able to actually observe the atoms themselves. And then he made it organized so well that he could actually predict elements that we didn't even know existed yet.
Yeah, and know what they would basically look like, what their characteristics would be.
That's crazy.
So much so that a French chemist actually came through and started writing papers saying, I found a new element. So, yeah, it was actually pretty crazy. And what happened is that Mendeleev straight up said, no, you didn't. You, sir, are a liar.
Nice. I like it.
Not only that, he straight up wrote a paper to prove this guy wrong. And he never seen this element. It didn't exist yet. He knew nothing about it, but all he knew is that based on what his periodic table, that element could not be there.
And he was right.
He was right.
Jeez.
He was right.
Well,
Now-
it's not arrogance if you're right.
Yeah. Now, Mendeleev wasn't flawless in
Sure.
his periodic table. In fact, it would take some fixing over the years.
Okay.
And the modern periodic table, yeah, it's based off of Mendeleev, but the way we arrange it, it needed some changes.
Why?
Well, the reason is that you go by atomic mass, most everything ends up in order, but there are a few exceptions.
Okay.
Where you have an atomic mass that might be heavier, followed by an element that is lighter.
Gotcha.
And
Okay.
so what they did, a scientist named Henry Moseley
Yep.
actually came along and said, actually, it's based on the atomic number, the number of protons that identify the element.
That makes sense.
And so they made those changes.
Nice. Periodic table. A lot of history.
Yeah, from alchemy to, history.
So basically what we're saying is all of science has a little bit of magic in it. Hence the name of the podcast and its name meaning.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. But if you try to absorb all this at once, you might as well just scream a Vada Cadaver into your ears.
Correct.
So
Which sometimes feels like the right decision anyway.
it does. Anyway, so this has been the second podcast. We hope you're enjoying it. Remember to hit the like, share, and subscribe buttons.
Smash them.
Smash
them.
And hit the bell because, of course, YouTube doesn't know how to work without algorithms. So this is Halsey.
This is Hanson.
Catch you later.